Hello?
What's up, dude?
Why do you always call me when you know I'm not here?
Well, you never know. I'm trying to make it like perfect timing.
Oh, and that was because I called you back and it never rang, and now here we are.
And here we are.
Here we are to the world. What do you say we talk a little triathlon?
That sounds good. Yeah, sorry I didn't get back to you earlier. I laid down with Hayden and tried to get a little shut-eye, and it actually worked. So, sorry about not getting back to you about our topic today.
Well, I mean, we had a draining video shoot earlier today.
Oh, man, yeah. I was, we took the nap, back in my trailer that I do in between, shoots and videos, and with my jar of like only red M&Ms that I asked for. So it's a tough life.
Oh, man, you're not that demanding.
No, I'm not. And if I had a jar full of anything, it wouldn't be M&Ms. I can tell you that.
Chocolate rice cakes.
Done.
All right.
Covered in, kale.
Love me some kale. You know what? I really don't like kale that much. I try. I don't know. I think it's kind of a trendy thing, man.
It is a trendy thing.
I don't even, was it even a food until recently? I know it was a food, but you know what I mean?
It's a filler. I saw something on Facebook the other day that says, add this much coconut oil to your kale while cooking, and it makes it that much easier to scrape into the garbage. Yeah, so I kind of take that. I kind of take that approach, but dude, I could go a million different directions today. I got a lot we could talk about, and I'm gonna let you choose. I just do want to say that I was like, man, I remember back when we did the dog cast, like probably 20 something, maybe 30 episodes ago, and that guy harping on us like, yeah, at some point, man, you're just gonna run out of things to talk about, and that's already happened. And I'm like, yeah, we have so much to talk about,
Oh, I know. I mean, you said you got a million things. I'd be willing to listen to a couple of those ideas.
Well, I mean, I think, obviously, I think the email you sent me could be like bridged into multiple podcasts. Because there's a lot to go on all those things.
Sure is.
But I think another one that I got that I thought was interesting was the forum members request for how to make your schedule when you travel a lot. I thought that was a good one. We always can do our follow up to the power meter one. I think based on I thought that was a really cool post earlier in our closed Crushing Iron Facebook group from Jeff Rayburn about our advice, and that he used it so we could do like best advice, worst advice, or how to bounce back from a poor race or a DNF would be another one. I think are all good topics, but and again, I told you the email you sent me, I saw a lot of good stuff in there. So multiple choice, Mike Terali, your pick.
First off, I think what I'd rather do right now is because it's top of mind, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. We talked about a lot of things earlier, so it's not like we don't have topics in mind, but we just kind of like to flow a little bit sometimes. And I think since it's such a I guess it's not the hugest of weekends, but you had a lot going on as a coach, and I'm curious to know, as a coach, what's going through your mind in these. And you kind of touched on it when we were talking earlier, about the swim or the bike and getting off the bike and what have you. But like, what goes through the mind of a coach on the morning of several races weekend?
Man, well, it really depends on the athletes racing and their personalities and goals, and then it obviously also is like how long is the event and where we are in the year. And I had kind of a myriad of races. Like yesterday, I had a guy doing his very Stuart Rogers.
Yeah, congrats, Stu.
Yeah, dude, Stu's come a super long way. Like understatement. To do his first Olympic triathlon, so that was nerve-wracking. Then you had a guy, Matthew Dixon, and Rocky Seymour, who were both competing up in Minnesota in these like ridiculous race conditions that were super hot, like 35 mile an hour winds. The winning time was like 30 minutes slower than the year before. They both had like just really bad luck yesterday, losing nutrition and chopping the swim. Then another guy, Jamie Lopez, he was doing his second Olympic of the year. He ended up having slash tube and wasn't able to finish his Olympic. And then I've got I had ladies. It was funny because I had all dudes racing yesterday and all the ladies racing today.
Ladies.
And today was pretty awesome as well. I mean, every weekend is awesome. You always learn something. And Kate Lopez, Jamie's wife, actually finished her first half marathon this morning. And I think it was 12 weeks ago we started working together. And her first long run was like 3.5 miles.
Wow.
And then
awesome.
like the week later, she was able to run for an hour for like the first time. So that was a really awesome experience for me to excuse me for me to watch and hear about. I could track her on Garmin. And then I had two ladies finishing 70.3s, one in Eagleman and one in Wisconsin today, Ironman Wisconsin 70.3. And it's funny, I always like preach to my athletes, and I preach on the podcast about perspective. Never lose perspective. And sometimes I got to be totally honest with you, is I will lose perspective as a coach, and sometimes forget like how incredibly awesome it is, and what of a huge accomplishment it is for people to do these things. And like Lisa, who did Eagleman, like sent me a text. She was like, "That was so freaking awesome. I had so much fun, learned a ton, did things better, finally got in those air bars." And it's like when you coach, and you've been coaching for as long as I have, and you coach so many different levels of athletes, that I think sometimes you forget how huge it is just to be able to complete one of these distance races. And there are a ton of coaches out there, and I've coached Kona qualifiers in the past, junior USAT All-Americans. I've coached 70.3 world qualifiers pretty much every year I've coached, and it's more often than not you're going to coach more people that don't. And it's not necessarily because of their ability, it's just because of where they are in their life and the time that they want to give to the sport. Not everybody wants to give 16, 18 hours, a week, or has that luxury. And so the most athletes you get are going to be your everyday age grouper. And so sometimes I think it's always great for me to get these texts back and get a reminder of kind of perspective of how really awesome it is to even accomplish something like this.
Yeah, that's so true. I can imagine. I mean, I know I forget that it's pretty awesome to accomplish. And as you're talking, and it's not because you said there's a few tough race conditions, and it's really hitting home with me, even though I don't feel like I had a bad race at Chattanooga 70.3, but I'm having a ridiculously hard time bouncing back. So if you wouldn't mind going down that road for a little while, I think that would be kind of cool, bouncing back from a tough race or a tough day or tough conditions or whatever. And it kind of, I think it really comes down to sort of being okay with yourself, being humble, or being kind to yourself, I guess is the best way to put it. Because I'm so, and I don't know if this is common, but for me, I am so hard on myself after a tough race, and and a lot of times it's kind of unrealistic, in the sense of like what did I expect, like really.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I was telling this to an athlete yesterday. It was, and I use this phrase all the time. Expectations are just future resentments. And a lot of times, especially early in the year, there's just no reason to even put any on yourself. And if you do, they need to be super objective and realistic, and with the conditions and what happened. And I think that you, excuse me, I'm still super congested and still dealing with some respiratory stuff. So if I cough a lot on this episode, I apologize. But
yeah, man, I want to talk about that. See if we have any doctors and nutritionists.
Yeah, seriously, I've been trying to lick this for a while, and I'm still struggling.
I mean, quick sidebar, because we were talking about this morning, and it just seems ridiculous to me that the elements in the air can cause that kind of chest congestion and phlegm and all that crap. And I'm just resigned to even believe in allergies. I feel like it's our system overreacting a lot of times, and I just want to know, like, I want to get some real hard evidence on some of this stuff. And I know you have your theories, but those are just mine.
Well, yeah, I'd appreciate it, because I just cannot lick this congestion. So
yeah, and like, what's a really good way to get? Because it does hang, right? I mean,
gosh,
once or twice a year I get
2
that.
weeks. Yeah.
And it just is like, why? Why does this keep happening? I mean, what is going on? It's like your system is.
Yeah, mine's been like super debilitating. It sucks.
Just driving on the road and like literally like I don't know, piece of old rubber comes out of your mouth. It's just like, what is this crap?
Yeah. Oh man. Like this is we'll definitely have to do E for explicit on this podcast, but I
think that helps.
Oh yeah, I think it does too. I coughed up and spit yesterday, and my loogie ricocheted off the pavement. That's how thick it was.
It's disgusting, but
I know, man.
True. But it's kind of interesting.
It's killing me.
I mean, it's always been interesting to me. It's like, wow, this is really going on in my body right now.
Mm-hmm. But all right. Well, we digress. I think you learn. I mean, everybody at some point in their lives, I think, is going to go through a really, really, really bad race, or a DNF or something. And I think what you do is you learn a ton about yourself, but I also think you learn you learn a lot about also is what your relationship is like with the sport, and we all go through it. We all go through really. I mean, if you've never had a bad race, and you've never had a DNF, then I would say you've never raced hard enough. You've never put yourself in too uncomfortable a position, and you just haven't been racing that long, because you're gonna have them. It's no way you're not. And so I had an athlete yesterday who had super difficult conditions, really, really rough swim. It was super hot. He ended up losing 2 of his nutritional bottles on his bike ride, and just went into the run just super, I would say definitely dehydrated and not enough nutrition. He ended up throwing up 3 times within a mile and was just struggling. And I think he's just, I think we all get this way. You just get mentally and emotionally, you feel defeated. I mean, I think it takes you a while to get back, and I think that's okay. I think you should bounce back from it. I think you learn 2 things about your relationship with the sport is do I overinvest and have unrealistic expectations, or B, was I really unlucky and I'm really down because it just means a lot.
Well, when I've said before that in the past where I've always felt like I'm curious about this because I don't have any races on the calendar either. And I've always said in the past, a really good way to kind of keep the momentum alive and keep going after a race is to have another one sort of waiting. And I have nothing. And it's sort of like we were talking about today, how that one guy was talking, that I was listening to a podcast, and he was talking about how sometimes students get bummed out in the summer because they're so used to having regiment during the year, and they have their days planned out for them, and they have studying, getting up, and classes and practice and what have you. And then they go to the summer, and it's time to relax and kick back. And there's no quicker way to get out of a routine than be out of a routine for a couple weeks, and how much harder it is to get back into it. So I wonder too if I do feel like I'm exhausted, but I have nothing really pushing my adrenaline either, because there's frankly nothing on the table to be concerned about. So that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. I think we mentioned that, previously in other podcasts. I think there's a window of, having a race to where it's really beneficial to just be almost forced into hopping back on the horse, per se. But then I think like if that's like a week or two, I may think that maybe even like too soon. I think it really depends on the person, like how mentally, I don't want to say fragile, but really how mentally and emotionally frustrated and down and honestly even like depressed, they get after a race, and like they're going to go into the next one. I would imagine with just like little to no confidence, and so that's not necessarily, I think, a good thing. You want to set yourself up for success no matter what. And so, but I do think that like, if you had a race like 4 to 6 weeks out, then that's pretty close to like, okay, I can take a few days, I can gather myself, I can mentally and emotionally kind of recharge, look back on what I did wrong, fix it, regain some confidence, build some steam, and then let's go do this again. And like I said before, like I don't think being upset is a bad thing. I think that it means it's important to you.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. It just makes me really wonder about how powerful the mind really is, because there's been, I don't know, 5 years of this for me, and for the most part it's just sort of like, when you've got that race sitting out there, and I've had multiple times when I've been in similar situations like this, and I don't know whether it be 6 or 8 weeks out or whatever, that something, some kind of switch flips, and somehow I find that energy, So I'm just, it's very interesting to me to think about how it would be so easy just to throw in the towel a lot of times, you know what I mean? Like on life in general or whatever it may be, but you have to find sort of that, it's kind of that why again, and I think in the end it has to be a really authentic why, or it's just gonna continue to nag you, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think, I kind of touched on this earlier, when we talked about my job situation. I think there's even like a window, and I think Steve Magnus has touched on this before, is like, even if a race goes great or a race goes really poorly, give yourself 24 hours to either bask in the glory or sit in your own stew. And then after that, get back to work,
Right.
and figure it out, like, cause there's huge, there are huge pitfalls to happen on both ends. Like you'll get complacent, if you had a great race, oh, I'm doing everything right, all I got to do is repeat. And it's just not that easy. And I had a similar situation with, before ultimately ending up to do this full time, is I kind of feel like I was getting drug along, and I spent like 24 hours, pretty down and disappointed about an opportunity. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do something else, and went full bore, full steam ahead. But it was what I needed. And I think that we get what we need a lot. We just need the wisdom and experience to actually notice that it's actually happening. And sometimes that's just not easy. I mean, I'm definitely not perfect at it by any means or any stretch of the imagination. It just happened that this time, I think the cards kind of fell into my lap, and things lined up, and I think it was the best thing that happened to me. And hopefully, if you have a bad race or a DNF or even a DNS and you don't start, you're like, all right, what could I have done differently? How can I prepare? And then how can I use this and spin it as a positive? Because I think I was listening to Ryan Holiday on actually one of Rich Roll's podcasts, and he was like, if you talk to like 70, 80, 90-year-old people and you ask them what regrets they have in life, they rarely ever say they have any.
Oh, really?
Because they always found that it ended up turning into something good, or they learned something from it. Like, do you regret dating or getting engaged to, or some people even marrying somebody and then ultimately marrying somebody else? No, because if I hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have met this person. And so I think that it's all about perspective and what you choose to take from it. And do you take it personally as, I'm just not good enough, or I'll never be able to do this, or I wasn't prepared enough? Or, okay, first off, I was courageous, and I had the willpower and the motivation to even put myself out to participate in this race that could have gone horrible. It did. And now I learned something about myself, and I'm going to go back and do it again. And I think that's the perspective that you need, that you have to have in order to be in this sport for a long period of time. Because you're going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs. And sometimes it isn't about like having something on the radar or on the horizon. It's about where you are in your personal like relationship with the sport. Because if it is just about getting better and doing things, improving all the time and find things out about yourself, then I think that you should be attracted to wanting to do that all the time. And the races are just, a benchmark to see where you've improved fitness-wise, but is literally zero reflection in a lot of ways of where you have come and how you have grown mentally and emotionally.
That's really, a life tactic because, there's something. Really, if you think about athletics, since we're talking about triathlon, that is the way people really succeed. There's a lot of people out there that are super gifted and things come naturally to them and they have marginal amounts of success, but in the end it's always the people that kind of regroup and take what they learned and get better with all the things they've learned, or take it and figure out what they like about it and what they don't like about it and get rid of some of it and go ahead and go in a more positive direction. And that's like, if look at sports up and down the list, man, that's just what happens. And then the people that can't figure out that part of the game, meaning find more gratification every time, keep learning, because I think learning is basically the key to life. And in many ways, the people who can't figure that out, including me many, many times, are get down or in the dumps about stuff, and they can't figure out. Like the local reporter said after the game, the Predators game, when they lost the Stanley Cup, she said a lot of people are walking out of there with frowny faces. Sorry.
What a ridiculously awesome journey they just had.
I know.
And I think that's even what the players said. But no, I think that you.
Well, that's it. The players said it, and I think that's the maturity piece right there that we all have to learn from. I think, fans are running around throwing shit and screaming, Sidney Crosby sucks and whatever, and he's like one of the best players ever.
Dude, I gotta tell you that. I gotta tell you that, man. When they did those chants last night, I looked over at Allie and I was like, "Are you for real?" Mm-hmm. Like, that's being like, Jordan sucks. No, he doesn't. He's incredible. He's outstanding, and you're never going to come close. So, I think it's just, I think fandom is like a really great representation of that. Like, how.
Yeah, man. It's like, go into that.
How objective you are about stuff like that. But I wanted to touch on something you brought up that I think was great was, it's like, take the good and leave the bad. Take the meat, something that you're going to use and keep, and then just get rid of the rest. Like, can you imagine if everything you brought into your house you just kept, and whether it was garbage or not, whether you were going to never use it again or not, whether it went bad or spoiled or you didn't like, and you just kept it? Like, it would ruin your everyday vision and perspective and attitude, and you'd be depressed all the time. But you don't. You get rid of what you don't like. You take out the trash. You put it on the curb, and you forget about it. And if you don't do that, then you are, I think, destined to repeat the same mistakes, but you're never going to find happiness. You're just not. Because you have this, this cloud hanging over your head of the junk that you continue to carry, and it's only going to get heavier. And the more you race, the more you're going to pick at yourself and pick, yourself apart and compare yourself to other people. And it's not healthy. And B, they're not you. Like, no offense, but, not everybody is going to qualify for Kona. And in my opinion, it's not because everybody doesn't want to. It's just because people don't have the time, or people don't want to, or people don't want to take away things from other parts of their life in order to make that sacrifice. It's all about sacrifices. What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you not? And I think that take the good and leave the bad from a race and move on, because you're always learning. Races, in my opinion, should never be success failure. It should always be trial and error. It should always be based on learning, not of these like ridiculous expectations that you may or may not have like zero control over. Like you train in 70-degree temps and then you come to race day and they're 95. Okay, guess what? You're more than likely, you may still PR and race well, like a gentleman we had in the forum did, over the weekend, which is awesome. But he definitely would have raced faster. More than likely if it was cooler. So, it's all about perspective and leaving the good stuff that you can keep and just getting rid of the bad.
Yeah, it's got to be easier said than done, though, right? I mean,
oh God, heck yeah, it is.
It's just like I'm the master at over expectations, and we talked about this. I think I don't know if we had a full cast on this or not, but it was that the idea of wanting to go to Kona, and then the reality of understanding what that really means.
Oh yeah, I think that was one of our first top 10 maybe podcasts. That? Yeah, and I think I even said I don't right here, right now in my life at that point, not possible. Right. I mean, I just didn't have it in me. I didn't have the time. I didn't have any of the energy, and so placing these expectations, there's future resentments. You say I couldn't do it, but do I believe inherently I do somewhere deep down have that talent and that ability? Yes. It's just going to be a point in my life where I feel like I have the time available, and then B, do I want to take that time?
Yeah.
Because I mentioned this to you before, I think, and maybe on a different podcast, was I always used to, before Hayden came, and these parents are like, oh, I just don't have time to train. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do this. And what I think that they usually mean is, I just don't want to make the time to do anything different.
Yeah, that's totally it. I don't want to make the time.
Yeah, and that's me. I mean, that's where I am in my life. I don't want to take the time to leave, Hayden and go spend 5 hours on a bike and not hang out with him. And come back and oh, he took his first step. And I was riding my bike. Awesome. It's so it's not that I don't have time. It's just right now, I'm married, have a great relationship, back in town, loving every minute. I'm at home with my son for the next month before he goes to daycare. And that's not going to be easy by any means, rocking the stay-at-home dad thing for the first time for the next 30 days, and then trying to start and run a business. But I wouldn't change it, and I'm not willing to sacrifice any of those to go on a 6-hour bike ride, And so, again, it's all about what you choose to take, and then I think realizing what you're willing to give up is directly related to how much or how little you're able to accomplish. And I think that that's the most difficult part of the perspective piece is, I know I have the ability to move up in my age group. I know I have the ability to go sub 5, or I know I have the ability to finish an Ironman, but I'm not willing to, not take Sundays off and just be with my family. Or I'm not willing to get up early and go to the pool while everybody else in my house is sleeping. It's like those things that I think really just kind of muddy the water. You know what I mean? I think that, you and I have totally different circumstances, life circumstances. But I think that's where passion can be so all consuming. I just don't believe that you can be so passionate about more than one or two things. And without it affecting all the other ones. And I think that, you have you're doing Saving Banksy and documentary stuff, and that's in that creative spirit inside of you is a huge passion of yours. So I just don't think that there's only so much passion to go around, and right now mine is this podcast. Mine is, all my athletes that are, that are racing, that I have the, privilege of coaching, providing for my wife and hanging out with her and my son. Those are really like the things in my life right now I'm the most passionate about. And so those get priority. Everything else is more of like a luxury fit in. And if you're going to ultimately achieve your best, I think at some point, or your quote unquote potential, you're going to have to, in the triathlon, perspective or work perspective, you're going to have to migrate and kind of move things around to where there's a different order.
That's definitely true. I mean, we've talked about, my Kona dreams or whatever, but I think that, like, the reality is that I've never put in the work, and I know that, and I always, I'd sit on TriCalc or whatever, and I'd like kind of go, what would it take? What would it take? And I kind of like, and I wonder if a lot of other people do this. They kind of always, or I tended to always, sort of put my perfect day in there. I wouldn't do it all the time, but every once in a while I'd be like, well, I think I could do that. I come back off a good run, I'd be like, man, this seems like it's... So I put my perfect splits in there, the perfect day, and invariably that wouldn't happen, of course. And, I'm at this, in my Ironman races, I'm pretty much in this 25 to 35, top 25, 35 range, and to think about what it takes to get to top 5 is such a leap. And what has happened is that I have this ability to be masochistic or something in races for the most part, and I can fight through, but I'm, as a guy who hasn't put in the work to get to that point, I go into these races undertrained to a degree, and I push to the limits, and then what happens is that race becomes a very painful event. And I always marvel, like, we had a lot of people post about how great a time they had at these races over the weekend, and I always find that kind of interesting because, I mean, I do too, and it's always fun, and it's great that last mile of Ironman when you're coming down the chute and you finish and you forget about it. It seems like all that stuff just goes away, right? How painful that day was. So maybe that's the end of it, but I marvel at the idea of a race being a great thing, and I think sometimes that could be solved if I went in with A, realistic expectations, and B, had trained up and then maybe stayed within my range. Because let's face it, in a race, I mean, if you do an Ironman, right, and for most of us, it is sort of not coasting, but it's not all out, right? It's not like sprint, Olympic-ish type stuff. I mean, and when we train, I think a lot of us train at a coasting place, And I know we've talked about all this stuff too, but as far as like, the difference is really kind of pushing the envelope on the fast and slow end of training to really ultimately get that, satisfaction or that next level stuff. But also, I think that might add a little bit more to the satisfaction if you actually put the training in and then you perform on your horse like you're always talking about.
Well, you said something that stuck out to me is like people don't, and this goes for everybody. People don't ever come into races undertrained. They come into races exactly how they trained.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah.
You come in with over expectations, or overshooting your goals, or unrealistic. You don't come in undertrained for a specific goal. You just picked a goal that was either unreasonable or was reasonable at the time, and different things have happened. So you came, it's like you came with the horse you trained on, and I think that there's just so many different circumstances to think through when thinking, or like, what's my life situation? Am I married? Do I have kids? What's my work situation? Can I even take off? Or how stressful is my work situation? Financial, like there's so many things to consider when taking on something, anything in life, that yes, that's why there are so many do not starts at so many races, is that and a lot of times it's because people get scared or because they, have this fear or whatever. But most times it's like you had these life circumstances when you signed up, and they changed dramatically from the time you signed up, from the time you're supposed to actually compete. And so they may not have meshed, or you signed up thinking that they were going to change, or thinking you could work your way around them and just, make it happen because you're you. And, while I think there's like, I'm going to go off on another quick tangent here, but, it's like you're more often not a product of your situation. It's like a buddy of mine were talking the other day about these, individuals in the prison system, and that like the average convicted felon in the prison system was subjected to alcohol or drug abuse between 9 and 11 years old.
The average really?
Yep. Yeah, between 9 and 11. Like it was just normal. Drinking and drugs. And it's like, and you hear a lot of people say, they should have just made better choices. I'm like, are you kidding? Like, I would love to think that I would have come out, unscathed from inner city projects, being, susceptible to that kind of life and alcohol and drugs at 9 and 11, when you're literally like trying to just like start to form who you are. But the reality is I don't want to say can you blame them, but what else do you expect? And so when you sign up for these races, and you've got these responsibilities and things, it's like, just be objective, and I sent you a link, from Endurance Quarter from a guy that I've quoted here before, Gordo Byrne, and he has this whole series of like how to qualify for Kona. And he basically, chapter 1 is like, oh, so you want to qualify? And he basically goes through this list of like what it takes to actually get to this level, depending on your age group. And I think that's what we often do is like, oh yeah, everybody wants to compete, but only about 1% of them are actually willing to do what's necessary in order to compete. And that's just a conscious decision that people make. And I don't know that there's not a wrong way, I don't believe, or wrong decision, but I just think that often there is too many goals or expectations made from a hope and a dream versus reality. And that comes with just being present in the moment, which you talk about a lot. It's like the more present you are, the more realistic things are going to come, and then the more joy you get from them without lofting these, often unrealistic, time goals. I've done it before. I'll still do it tomorrow probably,
Yeah.
but the real, challenge is to not do it, or to do it less, or to find yourself in a place where, it's you don't want to go in a race and be like, it's okay to fail today, because you shouldn't have that mentality. Your mentality should be, no matter what happens today, good or bad, fast or slow, I'm going to learn something about myself, both as a person and as an athlete, and I'm going to use that positively no matter what going forward. And if you can go into a race with that attitude, I think you win no matter what.
So I was gonna ask, is that what you would say to, like, all right, say I've got this.
I said it to multiple athletes on Saturday.
Yeah.
It's perspective.
Let's say I'm going in. I have this sub 11. No. Sub 11 goal at Ironman for my next one, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I say now. And then going into it, I know that I haven't gotten anywhere near the training for that, and maybe I'm dealing with an injury or a nagging whatever. And I just spent $750 and plus $1,000 on hotels and all this kind of stuff, and I'm 3 weeks out, and like I know that I'm gonna bomb compared to what my head was. Where I just think a lot of that happens to a lot of people probably. And so like, where's the joy? You know what I mean? What can you say that will help me attack that race from a better perspective when I know that it's just going to be a bummer?
Yeah, I think that and this happens a lot. I mean, whether it's athletes I've coached for a long time or athletes I just started coaching, I'm like, why are you even trying to figure out what pace you're going to run in a 10K in 2 weeks? Like, whatever happened to like just going out and seeing what you're actually capable of on a specific day based on this? And yeah, I mean, I get it that we go through these periods of frustration and doubt and anxiety even and fear, that you sign up for this race with these visions of going, sub 11, but you didn't train the way you think you should have, or you got injured, and you're like, well, now what is this going to be? And at that point, I think it's where you get to, kind of where I was, and I've talked about this on a previous podcast in 2012 at Louisville, or 11, when I just tanked on the bike. It took in too much sodium. My whole race was shot, and I sat in transition at like T-tube, and like, I'm not going to like even come close to my time, and I know for sure I'm going to walk a huge chunk of this. Why even like put myself out there to like not publicly fail, but have to endure internally how much I know I just totally effed this up, and I was like, I think not only do I owe it to myself, but I owe it to other people who don't have that opportunity, who may be watching, that may or may not even ever have the ability to do this. Like how selfish of me. And I talk about this often, as I'm not, I mean, you've been there, with me before. You were actually there at my first meeting when I picked up my 1 year chip. And I absolutely don't like doing that kind of stuff. I'm not very huge on, it's very uncomfortable for me to go up and I mean, it's a huge deal, to go, to even reach whatever you want to talk, say is a success story when it comes to sobriety. But, I'm just not comfortable doing it. And somebody once told me, you're not going up there for you, you're going up there for the other person in the room who's only been sober for 2 days and can't see that there's a way out, and you're that example.
Oh man, I like that.
And I think that's
so true, man. God.
It is. I mean, and we get so wrapped up in us, and it's like, who's looking at me? Who's looking at me? Or why aren't you looking at me? Why aren't you? It's like we have those both sides of the coin. Like, I can't remember what it was or who was talking. And I was talking about, you're on the dance floor and you're doing these dances and you don't want to go out there and dance alone because you're like, oh, well, everybody's going to stare at me. And then you go on the dance floor and you're like, why isn't anybody looking at me?
Yeah.
It's like those both ends. And I think we do that so often because we're so caught up in us, and that we don't think about the example that we set for people, and so I think that's probably the best, perspective. I can give there's an analogy for everything in life, and I think that, but the one that I said about picking up the chips, like it's literally nothing to do with me. Like, yeah, am I proud of it? Is it going to change my perspective? No. Am I going to change the way I am the next day? Absolutely not. I'm just literally going to keep doing the same thing. But it's the person who doesn't know how to succeed or hasn't succeeded or thinks it's impossible that sees you do it, and it totally changes.
Yeah, and how crazy that is to know that has actually happened to me on the other side of the coin, in the sense of, before I ever did anything like this, I went up and saw Ironman Louisville, and people, having what I would consider very, very difficult days and not very good times and things like that, and how much that put me over the edge and got me into it, and it's got nothing to do with the time at that point. And then I think I've talked about this before, but over the years, regardless of how I feel about, my times and things like that, and how many people through Facebook or whatever have, I think, almost been annoyed at my exuberance at first, but then over the years, how many of those people like slip through the cracks and start emailing me behind closed doors and say, hey man, just want to let you know I just did my first 5K, and you really inspired me along the way, you know. And it's so easy to forget how many people you can touch, whether it be spectators in the audience or friends throughout the world or people that just kind of come across your story, no matter what. Because, yeah, this stuff, I mean, when I did my first sprint, I thought that going into that day, I thought this was the craziest thing I ever did. I thought there's no way I could do this. I mean, without stopping, you know what I mean? And when I finished it, I was like, wow, man, that is incredible. And that is so far out of my head most of the time. But the reality is that every day or every weekend, people are towing that line for the first time, and they've been inspired somehow by somebody. And it's a lot of times it's you.
Yeah, I mean, it's that transcendence both ways that we talk about. When you race for somebody else, you tend to do better. And then when you race and you're not thinking about yourself, you impact a lot of people. And I think that's just what it's all about.
I think that's what it is all about, man. Life, triathlon, whatever. All right. I'm cool with wrapping that up there.
Yeah, me too, man. That was a good one.
I think so, too. You got anything to say about the camp? We've got, what, 5 slots open?
Man, well, 4 now. We have 16 athletes signed up in our first camp, so we got 4 spots available. It's going to be a huge camp. We got people coming from all over the country. It's going to be so much fun. A lot of work and a lot of learning. And then our other 2 camps are already filling up pretty fast too. So we have another camp August 10th through the 13th, and then August 24th through the 27th. So if you have any interest in those, shoot me an email, c26coach@gmail.com. And yeah, man, it's things are going well. A couple more athletes join this week. I'll give them a shout out on our Thursday podcast. But yeah, man, things are going well. And again, if you have any coaching inquiries, same c26coach@gmail.com.
Yeah, and send us your questions too. We're going to be doing
please do.
Viewer question podcast coming up soon. So shoot anything you got on your mind or about what we talk about or what we haven't talked about. And there's Hayden.
Yep, he's up from his nap. He's sitting here staring at me, like laughing, like you look crazy with that headset on. You say hi to Uncle Mike? No, I didn't think so. Yeah, and if you want to be part of the conversation, please join us on the Crushing Iron closed Facebook page. There's always great content and great conversations going on, and a super supportive group, no matter how your race goes or what race you're doing. So search that Crushing Iron group, and like our page, and if you have time, give us your choice of stars on iTunes.
Oh yeah, that's right. Subscribe, reach out, comment. I think that helps. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows, man?
I mean, I'm trying to figure out their algorithm, but I feel like, I don't know, maybe it is. But we always appreciate it, and it, again, it inspires us.
Still feedback.
Yep. All right, well, thanks, everybody. It's been great. Sorry we're a little late with this one, but we'll...
Yeah, I was a little under the weather yesterday, so I had to cut it short in the middle of the cast, so you can blame me.
Yep, but we've dug deep, and here it is.
We're out.
All right, well, take it easy, buddy.
See you, man.
Bye.